Hello, everybody. Welcome to the UK Azure user group, and still a virtual one, I'm afraid. We're all still slightly on lockdown, although I think things are slowly changing, and hopefully sometime soon we'll be able to meet up again. I hope everybody is keeping well and healthy in this slightly strange time, and I hope that everyone is doing good stuff at work. I know that some people have found that there's actually more work going on at the moment. In technology, I suppose it's a bit of a boon, this remote work and having to support new things, particularly in cloud computing. I think has been quite a good time. Anyway, it's not the same for everybody, so I do pass out my thoughts and good wishes for everybody out there who might be having a bit of a difficult time at the moment. Please do connect with us. We're always here to help. Anyway, on to tonight. We've got a good session ahead of us around infrastructure code. We've got Danny Corretja, who is going to do a good talk for us around infrastructure as code, the different types of approaches that he's seen in production. He's the head of development at Foundation SP. He's doing all kinds of interesting stuff in Microsoft Tech for quite a long time, and he does a lot of stuff these days around Office 365 and the Microsoft Cloud, including Azure, with quite a good .NET web dev kind of background in there. And what he's going to be talking about tonight is infrastructure and code, what it is, what options there are, the pros and cons between those things, and particularly focusing on ARM templates, the Azure CLI, and Pulumi. So without too much more to say, I'll hand over to Danny. There is a Q&A session, there's a Q&A panel that you can go to. You can ask a question and we'll put them in front of Danny. Danny mentioned earlier to me that there's going to be 2 slots to this session, and there's a natural break where we can raise those questions. So please just put your questions in the Q&A, and then what we'll do is we'll get to that natural break and we'll read them out. Danny will do his best to answer them, and then we'll move on to the next part of the talk. Okay, so that's all from me. Over to you, Danny. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andy. So yeah, welcome everyone. As Andy said, we are here to talk about infrastructure as code, and so I would like to ask everyone to join me in this exciting journey. We will start the journey where we have imagined that we have been developing an amazing web application during the past month, and now we are ready to get it deployed into a real environment. So that web application will need some resources to be created before we can deploy the web application. So we will start it there, and at the end of the journey, we will have that infrastructure deployed in Azure, and then we will be ready to deploy our web app. So during this journey, we will be learning what is infrastructure as code, how to implement it, and more specifically, how to implement it using 3 different approaches, which are ARM templates, Azure CLI, and Pulumi. Now, if you are not interested on any of that, now it's a good time to go away. No hard feelings. But for the rest of you that you are interested in this, please stay in. But before, let me explain a little bit about me. So I'm Daniel Corretja. I'm passionate about software development and IT architecture. I'm very lucky because that's what I do on my day-to-day job, which is great. As Andy said, I'm head of development at Foundation SP, where I've been working on for the last 6 years. And yeah, I had the opportunity to work on so many different clients and different solutions and using different technologies during these years. I'm sure you haven't noticed because my English, my accent is almost native, but I'm based in Barcelona. Obviously, that was a joke. And also on my own time, I like to spend it playing board games with my friends. So yeah, I own a lot of them. So if you want any recommendation, just reach me, and I will provide it to you. Also, if you want to follow me on Twitter, there you have the details. But well, let's start with this journey. So as we have said, we will start with this requirement of deploying some infrastructure, and at the end of the journey, we will have it deployed. So halfway So the first half will be to trying to define this infrastructure into a template that on the second half we will use to actually execute the deployment. And for that, we will be following three routes, which will get us to the same point, but we will be talking about the pros and cons of each of them. These three routes will be using ARM Templates, Azure CLI, and Pulumi. So yeah, let's imagine this is our application. So this is the infrastructure that our web application needs to have created. So yeah, just an app service within an app service plan, database within an SQL server, and app insights for logging. All of that will be created in the same resource group. So at this point, you may wonder, okay, why don't we just create that infrastructure through the portal, right? It's pretty simple, so it should be pretty straightforward. But yeah, in a real scenario, you will have different environments. So you want to have one for development or test, UAT, and production. So yeah, doing that manually through the portal can present some challenge. So some of them, obviously, you will want to have a repeatable process to avoid errors. So if you do it manually, yeah, for sure you will forget something in one of the environments, and then you will end up with misalignment between the environments, or maybe you mistype something, or you don't use the same naming convention when creating these resources in the different environments. Obviously, that won't have any bad effect on your application, but yeah, you want to have everything organized and clean. Maybe in some of those environments you want to use different parameters. So yeah, you could have like a list of each of the environments, and for each of them have a guide with all these different parameters. But obviously, yeah, it's not a great approach. Also, you all probably want to have some change tracking. So you want to track who, when, and why changed something in your infrastructure. So it's really hard to achieve that just through the portal, but yes, we will see there is a solution. And also maybe you want to have some reusable components in your infrastructure. So maybe you have a defined approach for creating databases that you want to reuse instead of having it everywhere duplicated. You want to just to have it in one place centralized and reuse that component. So the solution for this will be to use infrastructure as code. So as the name suggests, infrastructure as code is essentially to deal with your infrastructure as if it was code. So you have like a template defined within your source code. So you have change tracking on obviously in your source code and all of that. So for approaching infrastructure as code, there are two general approaches. So one is the declarative approach, and the other one is the imperative approach. So on the declarative approach, essentially what you do is define the desired state of your infrastructure. So you don't mind about the process, you just define where you want to get. And something behind the scenes, let's say an engine, checks the current status of your environment or your infrastructure and execute the required actions to get to your desired state. On the other hand, imperative approach, in imperative approach, you define exactly what actions you want the process to execute. And those actions will be always the same, no matter what is the status of your infrastructure currently. So under the declarative approach, we have ARM templates. Under imperative approach, we have Azure CLI. And right in the middle, kind of, we have Pulumi. So we will be detailing each of these later. So let's start with ARM templates. So what are ARM templates? So essentially, as we said, it's a declarative approach of defining your infrastructure, and they have essentially three components. So a template file, which is a JSON file, where that contains all the details of the different resources that you want to create. Then you have n parameters file. So one parameter file per environment. That's where you define different environments for different parameters for different environments. Again, it's a JSON file as well. And then you have a deployment execution, which is just a PowerShell execution essentially. But what? Let's see another template. So let me open this. So as you can see in here, I have a project which contains an ARM template. So this has been already created. This contains the resources that I show you in this fictional infrastructure that we need to deploy. And well, as you can see, the first file, which is the Azure deploy JSON, it's a kind of big file that, as I said, contains each of the resources. So let's see each of those sections in that file. So well, it has the schema definition and the version, and then it has like different objects. So the first one is parameters. So in here you define the entry parameters for your ARM template, which will be coming from your parameters file. Then you can also have variables. As you can see in here, I have some variables that are actually using a function. So you can have functions as well. In here, I have a function, which is get resource name. So instead of having different parameters for each of the resources, what I've done in here is create a function that what it actually does is gets the resource group name, which follows a specific naming convention that I want to follow, and replace the last 3 characters, which are -rg, replace it with what I provide in my function code. So in this case, for the app name will be app, for the hosting plan will be plan, and so on. And then under resources, this is the big one, which this contains each of the resources that you want to deploy. So as you can see, we have 5 resources. So this is the applications inside resource with some parameters, properties, and so on. Then we have the SQL server name, sorry, the SQL server. Then we have SQL database, which obviously depends on the SQL server. Then we have the hosting plan, which will host the web app with, again, some parameters like for defining the SKU for the costing and all of that, or different properties. So each of these resources have different properties. And last but not least, we have the web app, again, depending on the hosting plan and also on the application insights. So this is an ARM template. Yeah, at first glance, not very readable. So if you may wonder how can I start creating this, and I will show you that. But just let's see the other file, the other component, which is the parameters file. So for now, I only have one. But if I wanted to have a UAT environment, a product environment, and so on, I will have several parameters files. And in this case, I'm not using any parameter actually, because I want, as you can see in the template, I have just one parameter, which is location, and I'm using the default value, which is okay, get the location from the resource group. So I don't want to specify that differently in each environment, but I could, if I wanted, I could specify a different location for a different environment. So let's see how you create this. So if I go to Azure, in here, what I have a resource group where I already created manually all those resources. And the good thing about ARM templates is that you can generate a template pretty quickly from the portal, from our existing resources. So you have this option in here, export template, which is generating a template for me. Come on. Oh, okay, it was there. Okay, so as you can see, this has automatically generated a template. Obviously, You may want to tweak this a bit because this is already generated some parameters that maybe you don't want or you want to approach differently. But this is a good start for defining your infrastructure from existing resources as an ARM template. Also, this is adding some, well, here you have a list of all the resources that is adding. And as you can see, there are more than 5. It's adding some other configurations that probably you don't want on your ARM template. But yeah, just so you know, this is a good start for creating your ARM template. Also, let me show you something. So I'm not sure if you know, but you can access the release candidate portal. And as this message says, well, this is unstable and is for testing purposes only. But this is a good way of seeing what is coming. And what I wanted to show you is this nice tool in here. So let me just jump in here. In here is not visible yet, but this is something that Microsoft is working on. And what this gives you is a visual of the template. And yeah, as you can see, there are more than 5, as I said, more than 5 resources in here. But let me filter this out just to show the relevant resources. In here, there's a filter, yeah. And in here, I'm just pasting something that I prepared, but essentially are the name of each of the resources that I want to hide. And as you can see in here, you have a visual of what this ARM template contains, which is great to have a good understanding of what it contains. And there is an extension in VS Code to have similar visualization, not in Azure, but directly in your ARM template JSON. But yeah, just so you know that this is likely to come to the portal, and it gives you a good overview of an ARM template, because yeah, looking at this JSON is really hard to see what it contains. And yeah, as I said, this can be exported, and you can download the JSON, and you can start, well, tweaking your ARM template and removing the resources that you want to include, you don't want to include, and so on. So let's jump into the slides again. So let's see now Azure CLI. So Azure CLI uses an imperative approach, so it's a different approach than ARM templates. As we said, in this approach, you need to define each action that you want the process to be executing. And Azure CLI actually is very, very simple. It's just a component. It's a PowerShell script, and as we will see now, it's so much clean than an ARM template, just from the definition side of things. So if I open this. So on the left-hand side, we have that ARM template, which, as you can see, is pretty long. And then on the right-hand side, we have just an Azure CLI PowerShell script that essentially deploys the same infrastructure. So in here, we have the creation of the application inside, the SQL Server, the database, the app service, and the web app. So it creates, and well, we have some parameters on the top. But yeah, essentially it creates the same. And as you can see, this is so much readable. And yeah, if you're coming from a development background, it's so much easier to update or to tweak. So yeah, but as we will see later on the deployment process, there are some cons on Azure CLI. So going back to the last approach is Pulumi. So Pulumi is a whole new thing. So it kind of define your infrastructure using a kind of an imperative approach, but actually the deployment follows a declarative approach. So in the way that it actually checks the current state of your infrastructure and just create or update what it's required based on that. And a Pulumi project essentially have 2 components. So your definition of the infrastructure, which is actually done in code, and you have several options. So you can use your preferred language among a list. So you have Node.js, Python, .NET Core, so you can use C#, F#, or Visual Basic, or even Go. So it's pretty flexible in that way. So you can use your existing skills to create your infrastructure. And apart from the definition, it has obviously a parameters file, which is defined in a YAML file. This is open source, and it has different editions. So it has a free edition, which is for individual use. So you can only use one user on that project, or there are other paid editions for bigger teams that you can use. Just so you know, this is based on Terraform. So just in case you don't know what is Terraform, essentially it's another approach to deal with your infrastructure as code. But I haven't included Terraform in here because, well, the benefit of Pulumi, from my point of view, is that it's kind of the same than Terraform, but with the benefit that you can use your preferred code, your preferred language. While with Terraform, you need to learn how to do things with Terraform, essentially. So let's take a look at the Pulumi project now. So in here, I have another project, as you can see, and I have program CS, which essentially it's just running a task, which is under this file. And in here is where I have all my infrastructure. So again, I have some parameters. In here, I have some commented code. Essentially, this is the approach if you wanted to create the resource group. But in my case, I want to use an already created resource group. So you can, with Pulumi, you can use manually created resources or resources that have been created with whatever approach you follow, and you can introduce them into your Pulumi project. Just with the get project with the reference to that resource. And then again, we have the same resources, so an app insights, the SQL server, the database, an app service plan, and the web application. So again, pretty readable as well. I mean, this is using code, so it's as readable as you want. You could have functions or different ways of organizing your code. So compared with ARM templates, much more readable from my point of view. But the thing with Pulumi is that it has a dependency with a Pulumi service. So let me sign in here. So in here, I'm using a free edition. And in order to set up your Pulumi project, you need to create it in here in this service. And as you can see, you can select. I forgot to mention Pulumi allows multi-cloud, so you can use Pulumi to deploy resources not only in Azure but in any of those cloud solutions, which is great as well if you have that requirement. So you can choose what cloud is aiming this project and which language you want to use. And just you will name your project, select an Azure location, and I will just create this dummy one because I already have one created. And in here you will get some instructions to set up your project in your solution, which I already done, but essentially create a folder and then create a Pulumi project that will add all the dependencies with Pulumi, and then you will be able to start creating your infrastructure essentially. Now on the parameters side, if you want to have several, actually we'll cover that later. Let's jump on the slides again. Oh very much summarizing the pros and cons of each of these technologies on the definition side of things. So later we will see the deployment approach, but on the definition side of things, so ARM templates, they are good because you can start very quickly with creating the resources manually in Azure and then exporting them and tweaking your ARM template after that. Well, it has a reliable author behind the scenes. I mean, it's Microsoft, and they are pushing so much on that. They are using that, so they are continuously releasing new stuff there. But the bad thing, from my point of view, is readability. Maybe it's me, but I don't like to need to edit a JSON file. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel user-friendly from my point of view. Then we have Azure CLI, which is readable. I mean, we achieve it the same with so much more less lines than with an ARM template. Because it's using PowerShell script, you could build your own functions and different modules, so you can reuse some parts of your infrastructure. And also, it has a reliable author behind the scenes. It's Microsoft again, so yeah, that's good. Then last but not least, we have Pulumi, which again is as readable as the code that you wrote. It's reusable as well, because yeah, you can also build your own functions and reuse whatever you want to reuse. The good thing as well in Pulumi is that you can pick from a list of languages. So you don't need to upskill in a new language or in a new approach. It's just, for example, if you have a C# background, it's just C# using some libraries. So yeah, pretty easy on that front. And also the good thing is that with the same technology, you can deploy resources in different cloud platforms. So at this point, there are any questions about the definition on any of those technologies?
Hi, Danny, Sandy. No questions at the moment. I think maybe we're good to just carry on.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, good stuff.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So now we have our infrastructure defined with 3 different approaches. And now we are going to in the second half of this session, we are going to take those templates and execute a process to get the infrastructure deployed in Azure. So we will start again with ARM templates. So yeah, actually we'll jump into the demo. So the good thing about ARM templates on the deployment process is that, well, the first thing is that you can validate your deployment. Okay. Just so you know, sometimes there is a bug that the validate button disappears, but I found that if you unload the project and reload it, it's there. So yeah, with these projects, you can validate your template before actually deploying anything. So you can connect to, okay, I need to add my credentials. And obviously I have multi-factor authentication. So you can connect to your Azure, and what these loads, come on. Okay, so yeah, you can connect with one of your subscriptions, select one resource group. So I have this one, which actually show you that it's empty. So as you can see, this is a resource group that it's empty, ready for this demo. So I'm connecting with that resource group and I'm saying, okay, this is my template and these are the parameters that I want to use. And I can just click validate and that will validate my template. So if I had any errors on that JSON file, maybe a wrong parameter or whatever, this will show me the error. But yeah, as you can see, we have a template that it's valid. Another good thing about ARM templates is that you can see what will happen. So as I said, on the declarative approach, there is a process behind the scenes that gets the current status of your environment and select which actions are required to get to the desired state, right? So, well, first I will connect to Azure. Can you read the command? No? Or do you want me to sum in? And is this readable? Okay, I will assume yes. So now I'm connected to that subscription. So what I can do is with this parameter, so in here I'm executing this is the command that will deploy my template. So in this resource group name, I want to do an incremental deployment. These are my parameter. This is my parameter file, and this is my template file. And in here, I'm using the what if. I think this is still in preview, but it's really good because what you can do with this is not actually do the deployment, but get the status of my infrastructure, and this will tell me what are the changes that will be applied if I execute this deployment. So as you can see, well, in here it says 5 resources to be created, and you have the list of the resources. So in here we have the app insights, the SQL server with additional details, the database, the service plan, and the web app. So that has not executed anything yet, just has told me what it will happen. So now if I execute that without the what if parameter, this will actually deploy my ARM template into Azure. And yes, as the what if parameter has told us, it will create 5 resources. So hopefully that won't take too much. Also, while this is loading, so good thing about ARM templates is that the deployment process is idempotent, which means that several executions of the same process will produce the same outcome. So you have your desired state, and no matter what is your current status, you will get exactly the same outcome after executing it. So that means that if I already had some of the resources, but in my ARM template I'm changing some of the parameters, like for example the SKU of the database, for example, that will update my resources. I'm not sure why it's taking so long. Well, actually, it's already doing stuff. Not sure why it's not showing any message, but as you can see, this is the same resource group, and we started getting those resources. We got the application inside, the app service plan, SQL, and the database is almost there. So let's see if this finished. But yes, I said if, for example, I change. Yeah, if, for example, if I change this to be standard instead of basic, I just need to change this and execute exactly the same process. Okay, so it has finished. Yeah, succeeded. And if I refresh this, let's see if the database is there. Sometimes it takes a bit more to display in here. Come on. Okay, so it's there. So let me show you what I mean with idempotent. So if I look at here, you will see that now it's a basic configuration. It's using a basic configuration. So let's see that I change this time. And I run it again. Okay, maybe that's not the right. Let me just check one thing. Actually, let me change this to. Okay, it's basic or premium. Okay, let me change this instead. This one. Well, when this is loading, so essentially, yeah, you can essentially update your parameters, and executing the same process will update your parameters in your infrastructure. So let me just jump into the Azure CLI. So as I said, Azure CLI looked very neat, because yeah, it was very readable and very simple to create. But the bad thing about Azure CLI is that it's not idempotent. So what that means? So you can make your script idempotent, but you will need to start adding some logic into here, and you will lose the whole point of using this, which is to make it simple and readable. So you could add an if-else condition to check if a resource already exists, and if it already exists, you update it instead of creating it. So there are two different commands, one for creating, another one for update. If you don't do that, and if you change some of the parameters, so let's execute this. Again, I will log in into Azure CLI. So let me just check that it's using the right subscription. Okay, yeah. So I'm logged in, and now I will just execute that PowerShell script that we have in here. And actually, let me show you that the resource group was empty. So I have in here another resource group, which is empty. And yeah, this is running. And yeah, when it's finished, we will have exactly the same resources in here, but using Azure CLI. So it's starting creating resources. Let me just check one thing. Well, when this is loading, I will show you what I mean with this piece not being important. So I will change this to F1, and I will just wait until this finish. So also one bad thing compared with ARM templates is that you cannot validate your deployment process beforehand, because essentially your deployment process is a set of instructions, and every time that you execute the process, those instructions will be executed. So it's not dependent of your current infrastructure or your current status. So you cannot check what will be the outcome, and you cannot be 100% sure that the outcome will be the same. Because as I said, maybe some commands, I mean, I haven't tested all of the commands, but maybe some commands, when you try to create a resource that it's already there, they fail. Most of them didn't have not failed, but maybe some of them fail. But one thing that is not happening is that if you have the resource already created and you are executing the create script with a different parameter, that parameter will not get updated. And let me show you that. So now if I go to the database, this has been created as a basic one. So let me, yes, I said I've changed this to the S1. Sorry, this is the app service, not the database. So let me show you the app service plan. So this is using a F1. So I will move it to a B1, for example. And this actually will not update it because the resource is already created. And the create parameter is not updating an existing resource. So that's the bad thing about Azure CLI. It's good if you want to have a one-off process, a deployment process, but if you need to create like CI or CD pipelines, you need to start dealing with, okay, check if the resource is already there, and if it's there, update it, and if not, create it, things like that. So yeah, let's see when finish, and I will show you that this has not changed. Okay, it has changed. So some resources, some scripts change the parameters, but some of them no. Before I tried with the database, and that was not updating it. So yeah, the thing is you cannot be 100% sure that you will get the same outcome. That's the point. But yeah, in this case, it's actually working. But yeah, anyway. So now if we jump to Pulumi, let's see how is that process. So yeah, remember we have this project in here with all the resources. And the first thing you need to do is to log into Pulumi, which I already logged in. Yeah. And the second thing is, well, Pulumi has what its name is stacks. So you have one stack per environment, and each stack has a corresponding YAML file with the configuration for that stack. So currently I only have one stack, which is that. But you can create new stacks like doing stack new UAT. No. And what this will do is first it will create a file in here. Oh, well, you need to create the file actually, but what it's doing is creating this stack in here. So this is the service that Pulumi is using behind the scenes. And now in here, So now, as you can see in here, we have dep and UAT. And if I create a new one now for prod, for example, and I refresh in here, now I have prod one. And in here, I have the history as well of the deployment. So for the dep one, I've been playing before, but the prod and UAT now are new, so it doesn't have any history. So when doing a deployment, you need to select one stack where you want to deploy. And that will also tell which parameter file to use. So in this case, it will use this one, because I'm selecting the dep one. And to create the infrastructure, you just need to do Pulumi app. And the first thing it's doing is, as I said, getting the current status of my infrastructure. So in here, I'm in this project, I'm specifying in which resource group I want to deploy this infrastructure. So this is getting that resource group and checking what resources they are in there. And as you can see, it's saying I will be creating all of those, because if I go to Azure, Azure Pulumi, you see this is empty. So it needs to create all those resources to get to the desired state that I have defined. So now if I click yes, it will execute the process. So let's do that. And you have here a nice interface saying what it's doing currently. And yeah, the resources are coming from there. And also, while this is logging as well in my stack in Pulumi. So if I go into dep one, you will see that actually it tells me that it's running a process. And I have history of when it happened and who did it. In this case, because this is using the free version, there is only one user, which is me. Yeah, the database is always the last one. Okay, so it's finished. And yeah, there is some delay, but yeah, the database is there. So yeah, for example, if now I try to run Pulumi app again, because now there are resources, he will tell me, okay, so he will produce a different outcome than this one. Yeah, maybe he mentioned that there are some updates to apply, because yeah, there are some parameters sometimes that he thinks needs to apply to update, but yeah, you will see that most of it will say that it's already there. So yeah, as you can see, actually it's not saying anything. So yeah, everything is in your desired state, so nothing to apply, which is great. So let me say no. Also, the good thing about let me show you the history in here as well. So yeah, it says it succeeded, and I can see the activity, what happened, when. This is the update. And yeah, here I can see what has changed, the configuration that I applied, and all of that. Actually, yeah, I thought it provided more detail than this, but yeah, essentially, yeah, you got the history in there. And also what you can do with Pulumi is actually, okay, now actually what I want is to remove all that infrastructure from here. So you have the Pulumi destroy as well. So if I run this, all these resources will be deleted. Well, he told me, okay, I'm going to delete all of that. Are you okay? And then I click yes. And at some point, those resources will get deleted. Oops. Yes, you can see the database is gone. Yeah, he says, yeah, he's finished. He has finished, but actually, yeah, there is some process running still in here. And yeah, almost everything is deleted, but well, yeah, the database will be deleted as well shortly. Yeah, so everything is deleted now. So that's how you execute deployment with Pulumi. So just just summarizing the pros and cons of each of the technologies in the deployment process. So ARM templates, as we have seen, they are idempotent. So you can execute the process again and again and again, and you will get the same result. You have also validation. So you can see, using the what if, you can see what will be changed when you execute the process. So Azure CLI, on the other hand, is not idempotent. Well, not necessarily idempotent. So you cannot be 100% sure that an execution of your PowerShell script will produce the same result. You won't know until you do it. And sometimes you will get errors with your script because resources are already created or things like that. So yeah, when you need to create pipelines to perform incremental deployments in a changing infrastructure, probably is not the best option. And also, you don't have a way of validating what will be actually changing in your Azure before executing the process. And with Pulumi, again, it's similar than ARM templates in the way that it's idempotent and you can validate the deployment before doing it. But yeah, the bad thing is that you have this third-party dependency with Pulumi service, which, yeah, it's a bit of pain, but yeah, it's what you need to do. So, any questions at this point on anything?
Danny, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Any questions?
Yeah, a couple of questions for you. 1 second, let me just read that out.
Okay.
So, earlier on, there was a question you might just want to confirm quickly that Pulumi uses Terraform under the hood. Is that correct?
No, it doesn't use Terraform under the hood, but it's like a port of Terraform.
Right.
So essentially what it's already in Terraform, it's in Pulumi as well.
Okay, so it's like a port of Terraform that is similar, but I guess re-engineered for the framework that it targets.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I don't know whether it's the same person or another question similarly said that when they're dealing with tricky Terraform deployments, they sometimes have to manually edit a Terraform state file. Is that something that you can do with Pulumi? And what happens if deployments go wrong and the state is misconfigured? It's a pretty good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm afraid I never had the need of updating the state file in Pulumi. So I'm afraid yeah, the answer will be, I don't know, to be honest.
No, that's good. Good to have an honest answer rather than just making something up, eh? But I think that's, let me have a look. Hang on, we've got another question that's just popped up. Okay, let's, can Pulumi, after creating a resource, configure things like its firewall rules or KVPs under configuration tabs? I think it's key value pairs, I think.
Yeah, you can configure a lot of different things. These two scenarios. You can definitely do them. One thing that I didn't mention, but actually I think it makes sense to mention here. So Pulumi is using, obviously, it's a third-party tool. So one thing that I encounter sometimes is, well, and I'm sure it will encounter when, for example, Microsoft released a new service. Probably it won't be available directly in Pulumi. Or sometimes I found some scenarios where I couldn't do directly what I wanted with Pulumi. And one example would be, one recent project I needed to automate the deployment of some Azure Data Factory pipelines, and I couldn't find a way of doing it with Pulumi. But the good thing is that you can always have or use ARM templates within Pulumi. So if there is something that it's not possible write directly with Pulumi, because it's a new service that it's for some reason it's not available yet, or some specific scenarios, like for example, logic apps is another good example. The approach for the logic app would be to use an ARM template even within Pulumi. So it's very simple. You can have a mixture, and within Pulumi execute an ARM template deployment. So for any scenario that, for any reason, you cannot use Pulumi, the recommendation would be, okay, use an ARM template then.
Okay, great. There's a question from James. And James asks, why would you use Azure CLI rather than straight PowerShell?
Well, because it provides really nice commands. But you can also use PowerShell. I will use Azure CLI because I think it covers lots of scenarios, and it's pretty simple to use. Pretty simple to use. So you can use straight PowerShell as well.
All right, great stuff. Well, looks like that's the end of the questions for now.
Okay.
Is there any final words that you'd like to leave us with?
Actually, just summarizing pros and cons and my take on when to use what. So ARM templates, as we have seen, it's really good because you can just extract or generate the templates from existing resources. So if you have existing resources in your Azure, you can easily create an ARM template from them. They have a reliable author, which is Microsoft, and they are releasing new stuff constantly. It's idempotent. The process of deploying is idempotent, and you can validate beforehand. The only bad thing from my point of view is readability, and for me it's a deal breaker. But on the other hand, recently, I'm not sure if you attend some of the sessions in the last build event, but Microsoft said that actually readability is their key priority now on the development of ARM templates. And they say that at some point, they didn't say when and what they are going to release, but at some point you won't need to update JSON files. So I'm guessing they will release some kind of way of editing that JSON file using a UI, similar to what they did with the manifest on a Teams app, for example. So I guess, they will be working on something like that, which is great because, from my point of view, the bad thing about ARM template is I don't like to edit big JSON files. It's not very reliable from my point of view. Then Azure CLI, it's very readable, reusable. You can build reusable components. Again, it's developed by Microsoft, so very reliable. But the bad thing is you cannot validate your deployment beforehand, and you cannot be 100% sure that executing the same process will produce the same outcome. And last, Pulumi. So it's readable, reusable, you can choose among different languages, so not need to upskill on a new JSON template or new language. Essentially, if you have a requirement to develop or to deploy infrastructure in several cloud platforms, you can do it with Pulumi. Again, the process is idempotent and you can validate beforehand, but on the downsides, you have this third-party dependency that, sometimes, well, maybe you don't want to introduce in your processes. And well, here I share some useful links. Well, I think if you want to start with any of those, the first thing will be to go to the official documentation. So I have in there the links. And also it's a good thing to start with some samples instead of starting from scratch, because that will help with upskilling on any of those. So I have included some links in there as well. And just say thank you for joining me on this journey. So just as a summary, we started with this infrastructure that we wanted to deploy. On the first half of the session, we defined this infrastructure using 3 different approaches: ARM Templates, Azure CLI, and Pulumi. And then we actually deployed that infrastructure based on those templates for each of those technologies. And at the end, we had the infrastructure ready in Azure. So we have learned all of that. So what is infrastructure as code and how to implement it using each of those 3 technologies. So I hope you find it useful and it was clear for everyone. Again, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Danny. There was just one last question that came in during the summary. Might be a good, interesting thought to finish with. If you don't know any of the Pulumi supported languages, and maybe you come from a different background, maybe an IT sysadmin background, James asks, would it be better to learn ARM or look at something like Terraform?
Yeah, it's a fair question. So I guess it depends on what are your requirements. So if you want to be able to deploy infrastructure in different clouds, definitely Terraform, because that will allow you with just one technology do it. If it's used for Azure, there are ARM templates. Obviously, there are similar technologies for AWS, which I think it's named Cloud Transform or something like that. Yeah, but obviously, I would say if you want to be able to do it in multi-platform, it's like when you develop a mobile app, right? So you can develop it natively on each of the different platforms. So you can use something like Xamarin or React to share the same application or same approach for each of them. So it will be the same. Yeah, if it's just for Azure, then ARM, I guess. Yeah. But if you had the requirement for multi-cloud, then Terraform, I would say.
All right. Okay, and with that, I just want to thank you very much, Danny Corretja, for giving us a great talk about the infrastructure as code on Azure and the different options that you've seen. And I think that that was pretty informative and really enjoyed that session. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
No problem. Okay, everybody, we will see you all soon for another virtual, and hopefully soon enough we'll see some in-person events coming soon. But everyone take care, and one more time, thank you, Danny, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice afternoon.